Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Eric Alegria, former mayor of Rancho, Palos, Verdes, and current state senate candidate. In this conversation, we talk about leadership and the importance of working across political differences. I hope you enjoy. So, I'm really excited to talk with you today. I always ask this to all of the people on the podcast. Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks, Xavier. Um, yeah, good to be with you. Eric Alegria, running for state senate. Uh, my origin story started in central Washington State, where I grew up in a pretty agriculturally focused community. And through that sort of upbringing, had a chance to work alongside farm workers in an orchard and an apple packing warehouse throughout my teens and early 20s. Those experiences, especially seeing just the joy in the folks that I was working with from day to day, knowing that they were doing something meaningful to improve their families, generationally, sort of stuck with me, I guess, through life and has sort of resonated in my career. So that experience took me to Gonzaga University, where I had a bachelor's in political science, and then ultimately pursued a master's in public administration at USC in Los Angeles, which is what brought me here. When I was first out of graduate school, I actually went back to Washington State to run a nonprofit program, working with some of those very same farm workers that I grew up alongside. After doing some running this nonprofit, I decided that I wanted to move back to Los Angeles, and that sort of led to a variety of experiences, including working in a couple of cities. And sorry, now I'm getting phone calls, and then ultimately, interestingly enough, kind of put me in healthcare. So I ended up being a healthcare executive for about 20 years. I led clinics all over the Los Angeles, Orange County, San Bernardino areas, and delivering services to oftentimes, vulnerable and underserved populations. That work has culminated in various roles that I've played, including having been a president of a nonprofit recently that brought vision care to low-income schools throughout the country, and now in my current capacity as a chief operating officer for an organization that does a lot of street medicine and brings public and healthcare access to vulnerable populations throughout the Southwest. So that's been a consistent theme. Of course, while all that was going on, professionally, I've been a consummate sort of local volunteer, community servant, as I see it, and have been either appointed or elected for many years, including 2 terms as a city council member for the city of Rancho Palos Verdes. My current term as a school board member. I was a 3-time appointee to state commissions, California Film Commission, Occupational Therapy Board, and the Prison Industry Board. And all those experiences have just continued to be an important part of my life and providing community service. And of course, that sort of culminated in this most recent decision to run for state senate.
Yeah. So I my question about about this journey is I know that you did these things professionally on the side, including healthcare and things like that, but what motivated you to get into politics and
Gosh, yeah,
like as you put it, community service?
yeah, I would say that, yeah, there's probably two origin stories. One is what I mentioned a moment ago, which is working with the farm workers that I worked with,
Mhm.
just realizing hard work is one thing, but then there's always opportunity. And I felt like government could play an important role in providing, opportunity, whether that's, good public education or healthcare access or, supporting populations in needs, particularly, populations that are striving towards sort of that next sort of step towards generational improvement. And then the other story that you made me think of is when I was a grad student at USC, I worked for a city council member as a council aide, and I would do various tasks, a lot of them mundane, but many of them navigating, solving problems in the city of Los Angeles for local residents in the West Los Angeles, kind of Westchester area. And there was a time where I was able to get uh, coordination done essentially to fix a sidewalk issue. I thought it was a relatively minor thing, but this really kind woman sent me a basket of flowers and just said, "I'll vote for you" in the card. That's what it said. And even though I was, early in life and, um, and certainly not an elected, that sort of stuck with me at that point and made me feel like, gosh, it's a good feeling. And what better way to spend your life than to do something that benefits other people?
Yeah.
And that story stuck with me. In fact, I still have the card that she wrote me just as a keepsake in a memory.
Yeah. You were a counselor in your earlier stages. Do you think that you carry any lessons or do you still use experiences that you had then, in the way that you go about politics today?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think I use the lessons from that, um, gosh, every day that I'm doing community-based work. I think one of the most important lessons is just listen first, like listen to people, like really try to understand where they're coming from, what they're saying, uh, especially as you're trying to sort of deal with issues and solve problems in the community. I think that's important and it's easy to forget. But I've always done my best work when I'm collaborating with people and I'm really like intensely listening because oftentimes you may have good ideas, but the solutions come in the form of a collaboration and less as a sort of an independent idea. That's sort of the irony of being a candidate is because candidates a very like individual centered experience. But the realities of good governance is that when done well, right, it's team based and it's collaborative in nature. And so certainly as a candidate for state senate, it's hard to put that forth as an idea as a candidate, but I try to tell people when I can, like, look, it's one thing to have beliefs and ideas. It's another thing to be able to execute, and it's a whole nother thing to be able to be collaborative and have a leadership style where you can work with different kinds of people to solve problems. And I think that's what people want right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really beneficial value to have. I'm gonna ask you a little bit more about that
Sure.
later in the interview. But now I know that you served as a city council member in Rancho Palos Verdes, and I know that you were also mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes at one time. And I just wanted to ask you, what was that experience like? And do you think that you carry any lessons that you learned from the city level to the state level?
Yeah, oh yes. It was quite an honor. I guess that's partial answer to your question. But certainly there were challenges. So I had to lead in leadership levels, whether mayor pro tem or mayor, through a couple of significant crises. One, of course, was the coronavirus pandemic. So that was a difficult time to be in leadership, and just to keep the city functioning. And a lot of my role at the time was not just running the city, but being a channel for information. Oftentimes, local governments are the most trusted, level of government for people, and I took a lot of pride in talking to the hospitals every week, for example, gathering information from nonprofits, just making sure that we weren't just executing sort of typical city functions, but we were actually getting information out to people so they understood how to get the help that they needed. So that experience certainly stays with me. Additionally, I'm sure you're too aware too, Xavier, the Portuguese Bend landslide has been an issue, obviously, for 70 years, but certainly culminated in a deeper acceleration about 4 years ago. And as a city council member at the time, actually proactively moved to declare a local state of emergency and summon up resources and kind of move the conversation forward. We took some really significant steps, including a lot of investment in wells, amongst other things, to try to support the homeowners that are affected directly by the landslide itself, which was in the hundreds, but additionally, just the thousands of people that traverse that particular roadway. So I'm proud of what we did. I think we reacted to the crisis. I think we stabilized the crisis. Certainly not there's not an end to that issue in near sight, but nonetheless, I think we did the initial emergency response, and I think we fundamentally changed the way the city sort of looked at the issue, in that we took a proactive approach to, hey, let's be the level of government that's trying to solve the problem. And to the latter part of your question, that's a perfect segue, which is in the case of the landslide, albeit good intentions from other levels of government, I didn't feel that we were always getting the support we needed from elsewhere. And to this day, I know that we're continuing to lobby for a redefinition of landslides in the context of emergency, that qualifies for emergency response. a Cal OES in the state, FEMA at the federal level. And that's too bad because with climate change, I think, we have to be thinking uniquely and differently about our communities and different crises. And so that's one of many reasons why I chose to step forward as a state Senate candidate, because I didn't feel like our voice was always carried the way we wanted it to be.
Yeah, I think you're really right about that. I've also heard it from other people, like Paul. He's talked about how, or just everyone who's served in a local position thinks that going to the state allows these local crises to become more widely recognized. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you're extremely right about that. Um, and I think, well, now obviously, like you said, you're focusing on running for state senate in the district, which is currently represented by Ben Allen. I've asked you a little bit about what motivated you to run for this seat, but my question for this is, was running for state senate a goal you always had in mind, or was that more of a thought that kind of formulated over time?
Yeah, the latter. I've always enjoyed serving, and that's just part of who I am. I consider myself, community and public servant. Whether that's by an appointed a professional role or elected, that's just part of my identity, who I am, and why I my work. I think it matters to me. I guess that I do something meaningful with my time here on Earth, and as part of that, I've really been rewarded. I think in the relationships that I've established in the work and the accomplishments that I think we're very proud of over that time frame. But it wasn't the original thought. It did come over time, and as we just touched on, it sort of came through a little bit of necessity as well, in recent experiences.
Okay. Because of the recent experiences, I assume where local issues are not being heard, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So on that more, to be more specific, you chose state senate. There are other opportunities like state assembly and other state levels of government. Why did you choose state senate?
Yes. Well, there, obviously, I think most people know, your listeners will likely mostly know, but there's 40 state senators, 80 assembly members.
Mhm.
Um, in my opinion, these communities, the beach communities, West Los Angeles, the coastal communities, like this is the most beautiful place to be on Earth, not just in the United States or California. So one, it's just an honor. And given my experiences having lived in Venice Beach, having lived in El Segundo, and sort of my life and journey having taken me throughout this district, I care a great deal about these communities, and that sort of resonated with me when I was evaluating whether to move forward. One of the other factors to Xavier, as we sort of touched on, is I realized as I was learning about who is running that there wasn't going to be a South Bay candidate, and I felt like it was really important
Mhm.
that this particular portion of the district, although all coastal communities in this district are critical, and as I mentioned, worked for a West LA City Council member. In fact, I was a high school football coach in Santa Monica at Santa Monica High for a little while through that time frame. So I know these communities as well, and I care a great deal. But the unique concerns of our coastal communities here in the southern part of the district, I didn't think would have voice in this campaign, and I wanted to give that voice.
That's really inspirational. I think that, you're right. Like you brought some of your roots, you've been in the South Bay, and you're bringing that to the state level. Um, I think my last question, in terms of the state Senate campaign specifically, is if you could pick two or three issues, priorities, what are they? I mean, when you're elected, what would you focus on, or what are you focusing on now? Like two or three big priorities that you think are affecting
Oh,
our communities greatly.
yeah, I appreciate that question. I mean, it's public safety, it's quality of life, and it's the economy. I'll elaborate a little bit. Public safety, I was fortunate when I was mayor, given several things we did, also as a member and chair of our public safety committee for the four cities to improve our, public safety overall. We actually achieved fourth safest city during that time frame, which I was very, very proud of. The only one of the cities in California during that particular report that was in Los Angeles County. So just something I was really, really proud of. And more importantly, we were already feeling the concern, especially with all the open space in the Palos Verdes Peninsula, about removing fornication, about fire concerns, and given that we're largely as a community in high fire severity zone, we took a lot of meaningful proactive steps to ensure our readiness. Including the implementation, for example, of artificial intelligence cameras that do sort of early detection, amongst many, many other things, as well as establishing a committee that included the four cities to develop a cohesive four-city plan. So to me, all of those experiences apply across the whole coast, including, of course, all our friends in the Palisades who endured such a tragedy over a year ago. And I think there are lessons learned in there that would be applicable to not just recover from the fires, but also ensure preparedness and responsiveness to ensure that there isn't more. And then in terms of quality of life, yeah, there's a lot of issues locally. One of the issues to me that's really important is community planning. Specifically how we go about building up our communities. It's been debated for many, many years. Most of the origin stories of these coastal communities go back 50, 60, 100 years. And they'll tell you that the origin of the communities really started with that issue. Like we wanted control in local communities over how to build in a way that made sense. And so over the last 5 years, there's been some legislation that's well intended to address affordability, but in my personal opinion, has gone sort of too far. And really, one isn't addressing affordability, and two is sort of forcing local governments to not have essentially a role in determining kind of the build out of their communities. And obviously, given what I just shared about the fires, about climate change, a policy that really aims to deal with housing production affordability is important. But it also needs to be, partnered collaboratively with the local governments and across regions. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for to make sure that policy goes in the right direction. So our coastline can, continue to maintain its beauty and its thoughtfulness and how it's built over the next, couple of decades. So that's an example. And of course, the homelessness crisis, mental health crisis, something I'm really familiar with. And my day job as a CEO of a public health company, we do work out in the communities. And so it's not an issue foreign to me. Obviously a very complex issue, but requires a lot of support, coordination, and resource. And I think there's an opportunity just to make sure that we're resourcing those quality of life issues in the right way, and that we're holding folks accountable for the outcomes. And we're actually getting folks off the street, into transitional housing and into better stability. It's a challenge for all communities and all societies, but it's a rather important one, and one that's been, of course, a struggle in the Los Angeles area for a while. And then in terms of the economy, actually, I own a small business in West Los Angeles, have for the last 15 years. And I know what it's like to be a small business person, operating, trying to produce jobs for the local community. And that can be challenged if you have a set of government policies, albeit maybe well-intended, that make it difficult to function as a business community. And so those are, all important issues to me.
Yeah, that's definitely really true. I think that it's really valuable that there are a lot of these big issues like mental health and affordable housing, but I also think it's valuable that you're finding issues that are extremely specific to the South Bay and the district in general, because I just think that creates the best form of policy. Um, now
Me too.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you more about your, I guess, just broader approach to politics. So my first issue is that there are tons of different perspectives. We are in a very polarized political environment right now, and I'm just wondering how you approach situations like that.
Yeah, I love that question, Xavier. It's one of my whys. I mentioned sort of the Southern representation piece, but on a even more on an even deeper level, I'm troubled, especially as a father of four kids, anytime I flip on the news and I see just sort of the level of divisiveness that feels like we have in society, or just in my daily life, and I sort of experience folks trying to engage on important but difficult political conversations, that sense of divisiveness. And I think people are really craving right now, a willingness and a leadership that it maybe doesn't fully, but certainly at least attempts to bring, different perspectives to the table. Just purely on the political question, I was the only Democrat on my city council for the first 5 years of my time. Obviously, local governments are different. However, I was very proud of the fact that me and my Republican colleagues just sort of collectively agreed, like, let's just focus on getting things done because that's what people are interested in. And one of the biggest compliments I got, after I left council was, gosh, you guys were pretty quietly doing your work, and we see all of these outcomes. Butte community, built a community center. We introduced the expansion of our trails and growth of our trails. We bought new lands. We put protections in place for those lands. So just a lot of things that I'm very proud of. And it would have been possible if I hadn't actively worked in partnership with my colleagues to, have their support for some of these same programs. So my approach is listen. It doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but we do have to get back to a place, I think, as a society where we sort of ground ourselves again in our like really core values. And one of those core values to me is, frankly, we're Americans first. To me, we're Californians first before we're Republicans or Democrats, and thirdly, community first. I see us being community members first, and that makes us neighbors, and therefore we're all interconnected, and it's important that we work together to get things done.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, in a nutshell, it's about listening and emphasizing common similarities rather than focusing on differences.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you can do that. And it's okay to have policy differences, but I think what's gotten scary is it feels like we've gotten to a place where we're debating what I feel are probably long held core American values in some of the conversations that are being had today, and we got to get back to that place where we can find that common ground.
yeah. Okay. Well, I there's one more section that I'd like to focus on, and it's more about advice for the youth. My first question is, I know that you got involved in politics at a young age. Like you said, you worked as a council aide and things like that. And I just think that what advice for students who don't know how to get involved, or for students who are, want to make a change politically, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's really simple. Show up. I mean, that sounds silly, but some of the things I've been able to do in my life were simply because I reached out. Even that city council job that I had early in my career was a product of me just, reaching out, inquiring, expressing interest. In fact, I think that I worked for free as an intern for 3 months, and then I was eventually paid and made an aide. So if you're interested and you have heart for this work, which of course, Xavier, I know you clearly do as well, and I see great things for what's ahead of you. Use that, let that passion, let that heart drive you towards wherever it's going to drive you. It'll be an interesting journey. I feel like that's what I've done in my life. Sometimes it's been a windy path, but ultimately that core identity of who I am and just wanting to have heart in the work that I'm doing has never changed. And so I would encourage all the young people out there that are thinking about their futures to listen to that sort of nagging voice in their minds telling them to do something, different, or show up or try something new. Even with failures, which I wouldn't even qualify as failures, it's you'll never regret it. And then the things in my life where I've maybe not been successful, you learn from them and you move forward. And so you just got to open yourself up, put yourself out there, and take that step.
Yeah, I think you're right. What was surprising to me is, when I was first getting started with this kind of stuff, I don't know, I thought they'd be too busy to answer, but when you really just reach out, it's surprising how much they actually answer, how much they actually answer.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess this one's kind of cliche, but If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, whether that's your younger self working on the farms or whether that's your younger self being a council aide, what would that piece of advice be?
Gosh, that's a good question. I would say to have two things probably. One, to have patience. Life is a progression of small moments, and each moment matters a lot. And then the second part is related to the same thing, which would be to make sure I enjoy every moment. I think this is natural, but as you get older, you start to appreciate those moments, more and more. And I was so intent on my work ethic and my early part of my life, academically, professionally, that I forgot once in a while to sort of just soak in and enjoy every single moment. So do it.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, being patient is definitely something that I struggle with, but I think that, once you acquire that skill or work on that skill, a lot of things come more easily.
Well said.